1954, a department store in Cincinnati, Ohio. The perfume counter is the first thing you smell when the glass door swings open, and a woman in a full-skirted cotton dress stops at a mirror near the hosiery display to check the seam running up the back of her stocking. She is not dressed for a party. She is dressed for a Tuesday. And here is the thing that stops me every time I think about it. Almost everything she is wearing has quietly come back. And most women walking past that same mirror today have no idea where it came from. To understand why these pieces are coming back, you have to understand what post-war American women were actually dressing for. The late 1940s and early 1950s were a very specific cultural moment. Rationing had ended. Fabric was available again. Christian Dior had released his new look in 1947, and by 1950, that silhouette, nipped waist, full skirt, soft shoulders had become the aspirational blueprint for everyday American women's clothing from the five and dime all the way up to the department store. It was deliberate femininity, and it was everywhere. The first piece on our list is the full-skirted swing dress. And I want you to understand that in the early 1950s, this was not a costume. It was a Wednesday. Women wore these dresses to the grocery store, to church socials, to a neighbor's kitchen for coffee. The silhouette is exactly what modern fashion writers are calling back right now. Fitted bodice, cinched waist, skirt that flares out from the hip and moves when you walk. Good Housekeeping named the full swing dress one of the explicitly revived 1950s trends, appearing in current collections. It never really left, but it is being rediscovered by women who have no idea their grandmothers wore it to buy pork chops. Number 2 is the A-line dress, which is the swing dress's quieter, more tailored cousin. Where the swing dress has volume and drama, the A-line is clean and precise. It skims the waist and flares gently to the knee, and it was the dress a 1950s woman reached for when she wanted to look polished without looking like she was trying too hard. Good Housekeeping specifically calls the A-line dress out as a 1950s shape that is back in contemporary fashion. What is interesting is that the A-line works on virtually every body type, which is exactly why it survived every decade in between, and why it keeps coming back. Number 3 is the pencil skirt, and this one has a story worth telling. The pencil skirt was the other side of the 1950s silhouette coin. While the full skirt said softness and domesticity, the pencil skirt said something a little sharper. It was the skirt a woman wore to the office, to a luncheon, to a place where she needed to be taken seriously. It hit just below the knee. It was cut close through the hip and thigh, and it required a certain way of walking, a shorter stride, a deliberate pace. Modern fashion writers have documented its return explicitly. It is back on runways and in workwear collections, and it looks almost identical to what women were wearing in 1955. Number 4 is the fit and flare dress, which sounds like a modern marketing term, but is simply the post-war silhouette described in contemporary language. The fit and flare fits close through the bodice and waist and then flares dramatically from the hip. Modern brands selling 1950s-inspired clothing use this term constantly now, and style guides describing how to dress in a 1950s manner list the fit and flare as the single most essential piece. What I find remarkable is that women in 1952 did not call it anything. It was just the shape of a dress. It did not need a name because it was simply what dresses looked like. Number 5 is the petticoat, and this is where things get genuinely interesting. A petticoat in the 1950s was not decorative. It was structural. It was the scaffolding that gave the full skirt its shape, its volume, its bounce. Stiffened with crinoline or layers of net, it rustled when you walked and held the skirt out from the body in that characteristic bell shape. Modern brands selling 1950s-style clothing list the petticoat as a deliberate revival piece, not a costume accessory, but an actual garment being worn under full skirts today. Your grandmother knew that the skirt was only as good as what was underneath it. Number 6 is the matching set. And this is one that surprises people when I tell them it is not a modern invention. In the 1950s, coordinated separates were a practical staple. A woman might have a skirt and blouse cut from the same fabric, or a cardigan and shell in the same color, worn together as a deliberate set. Good Housekeeping specifically names the matching set as a 1950s trend that is explicitly back in current fashion. The logic behind it was sound. Buying two pieces that worked together gave you the look of an outfit with the flexibility of separates. It was economical and it was elegant, which is a combination that never really goes out of style. Number 7 is the tailored suit, and I want to be precise about what this looked like in 1952. This was not a boxy blazer and trousers. This was a nipped waist jacket, often with a peplum or a fitted hip, worn over a pencil skirt or a full skirt. The shoulders were natural, the lapels were neat, and the whole effect was one of composed, deliberate elegance. Women wore these suits to church, to appointments, to any occasion that required them to represent themselves well. The tailored suit is documented as part of the 1950s revival in current fashion. And when you see it on a modern runway, the post-war DNA is unmistakable. Number 8 is Capri pants, and this one has a very specific origin story. Capri pants, cropped to mid-calf and cut slim through the leg, became popular in America in the early 1950s after Audrey Hepburn and other style figures were photographed wearing them. They were casual, they were modern, and they were a quiet rebellion for women who had spent years in full skirts. By the mid-1950s, American housewives were wearing them in the backyard, in the kitchen, on weekend errands. The research brief confirms capri pants as one of the documented 1950s pieces back in contemporary fashion, and they have been photographed on virtually every major street style account in the last 2 years. Number 9 is the high-waisted jean, and this is where the 1950s connection to modern fashion becomes almost uncomfortably direct. The research brief specifically names the Levi's 501 as the high-waisted jean that embodies the 1950s revival. In the 1950s, women who wore denim, and not all of them did because denim was still considered casual to the point of improper, in some circles, wore it high-waisted, rolled at the cuff, and fitted through the hip. The Levi's 501 has been in continuous production since 1873, but its current revival is explicitly tied to its 1950s silhouette. The waist sits at the natural waist. The hip is full, and the leg is straight. It is the same jean. Number 10 is polka dots, and I know that sounds almost too simple, but hear me out. Polka dots were not a novelty print in the 1950s. They were a foundational pattern. They appeared on day dresses, on blouses, on swimwear, on scarves, on aprons. The research brief documents polka dots as a specific 1950s pattern that has returned in contemporary collections, named explicitly alongside flared skirts and high-waisted jeans as part of the documented revival. There is something about the geometry of a polka dot that reads as cheerful without being childish, and 1950s women understood that intuitively. They never wrote it down, but every woman knew. A polka dot dress was always the right answer. Number 11 is the floral print. And in the 1950s, this was not the faded boho floral of later decades. This was a bold, graphic, deliberately feminine floral. Roses, peonies, and abstract blooms in high contrast colors on cotton or rayon day dresses. The research brief confirms florals as a documented 1950s pattern that is back in current collections. What distinguished the 1950s floral from earlier versions was its scale and its confidence. The flowers were large, the colors were saturated, and the print was meant to be seen. Modern versions are almost identical, and when you hold a 1950s dress next to a current one from a revival brand, the resemblance is startling. Number 12 is the cat eye sunglasses, and this is one of the most direct lines from the 1950s to right now. The cat eye frame, with its upswept outer corners, was developed in the late 1940s and became the dominant sunglasses silhouette of the 1950s. Good Housekeeping names cat eye sunglasses explicitly as a classic 1950s statement style that is back in contemporary fashion. What is interesting about the cat eye is how precisely it frames the face. The upswept corner draws the eye upward and outward, creating the appearance of a lifted cheekbone. Women in 1955 understood this. They chose their frames the way they chose their lipstick, with intention. Number 13 is gloves, and I want to spend a moment on this one because the glove in the 1950s carried social information that we have almost entirely lost. A woman wore gloves to church, to the doctor, to the department store, to any occasion that required her to present herself as composed and respectable. Short white cotton gloves for daytime, longer gloves for evening. The research brief confirms gloves as a documented 1950s accessory that is back, named alongside pearls and cat-eye sunglasses in modern-style guides for 1950s-inspired dressing. What I find moving about this is that gloves were a form of quiet dignity. They said, "I took care getting ready this morning." Number 14 is the pearl necklace, and I am not talking about the single-strand pearl as a symbol of conformity, which is the lazy reading. I am talking about pearls as the 1950s woman's equivalent of a finishing touch. A single strand of pearls, real or cultured or simulated, was the accessory that pulled an outfit together the way a period at the end of a sentence pulls a thought together. The research brief confirms pearls as a documented 1950s accessory included in modern revival-style guides. Current jewelry designers are producing single-strand and layered pearl pieces at a rate not seen since the post-war era, and the customer buying them is often younger than you would expect. Number 15 is the structured handbag, and this is one that Good Housekeeping specifically identifies as a 1950s trend poised for renewed popularity in current fashion. The structured handbag of the 1950s was a rigid or semi-rigid bag, usually in leather or faux leather, with a top clasp and a short handle designed to be carried over the wrist or in the crook of the arm. It did not slump. It held its shape. It sat on a table and looked composed. In an era of soft tote bags and slouchy crossbodies, the structured handbag reads as almost radical in its insistence on having a shape. That is exactly why it is coming back. Number 16 is the Statement Brooch, and this one lives in a category I think of as jewelry with a job. In the 1950s, a brooch was not sentimental clutter. It was a deliberate focal point. Women pinned them at the collar, at the waist of a suit jacket, at the shoulder of a sweater. They were often large, often jeweled or enamel, and they served the same function as a bold necklace does today. They drew the eye to a specific point and anchored the whole look. Statement jewelry is documented in the research brief as a key 1950s accessory category, and the brooch specifically has been appearing on runways and in editorial fashion at a pace not seen in decades. Number 17 is the twin set, which is the matched cardigan and shell combination that was the 1950s woman's answer to almost any occasion that fell between formal and casual. The shell, a sleeveless knit top, was worn alone in summer or under the cardigan in cooler weather. The cardigan buttoned neatly and could be draped over the shoulders for a different effect entirely. Twin sets appeared in cashmere for women who could afford it, and in acrylic blends for women who could not, and the silhouette was the same either way. The twin set is part of the broader matching set revival documented in current fashion, and it is being sold right now in colors that would have looked perfectly at home in a 1954 Montgomery Ward catalog. Number 18 is the circle skirt, which is the full skirted silhouette taken to its most geometric extreme. A circle skirt is cut from a full circle of fabric, which means it has maximum volume and a perfectly even flare all the way around. In the 1950s, circle skirts were often decorated with novelty prints, poodles, musical notes, cocktail glasses, fruit, anything that could be rendered in a repeating motif. They were worn for dancing, for parties, for Saturday afternoons. The circle skirt is part of the documented flared skirt revival in current fashion, and the novelty print version in particular has been appearing in boutiques and on vintage-inspired brands with a frequency that would have delighted the women who first wore them. Number 19 is the wrap dress, which most people associate with Diane von Furstenberg in the 1970s. But the wrapped and draped silhouette has clear roots in 1950s, day dresses that crossed at the bodice and tied at the waist. The principle is identical. A single piece of fabric that wraps around the body, cinches at the natural waist, and creates the hourglass silhouette that was the era's ideal. The wrap construction was popular precisely because it was adjustable and forgiving, and it worked across a range of body types. It is documented as part of the broader 1950s silhouette revival, and when you understand its post-war origins, the 1970s version looks less like an invention and more like a rediscovery. Number 20 is the boat neck top, also called the bateau neck. And this is the neckline that made Audrey Hepburn look like she had been poured into her clothes. The boat neck runs horizontally across the collarbone from shoulder to shoulder, wide and shallow, and it frames the neck and shoulders with a kind of architectural elegance. In the 1950s, it appeared on sweaters, on blouses, on the cotton tops worn with capri pants for a casual weekend look. It required no jewelry because the neckline itself was the statement. Modern fashion writers have noted the bateau neck's return as part of the broader 1950s-inspired silhouette revival, and it is appearing in current collections with the same clean precision it had 70 years ago. Number 21 is the full skirt with a defined waistband, which sounds redundant until you realize that the waistband itself was a design element in the 1950s, not just a functional seam. Wide waistbands, often in a contrasting color or fabric, drew the eye deliberately to the narrowest point of the body. They were sometimes belted over, sometimes built into the skirt, and they were always intentional. The defined waistband is part of the documented high-waisted and full-skirted revival in current fashion, and it is appearing on skirts and dresses in a way that is almost identical to what you would find in a 1952 pattern from Simplicity or Butterick. Number 22 is silk and taffeta for daywear. And this is one that I think gets overlooked because we associate these fabrics with formal occasions now. In the 1950s, a woman might wear a silk blouse on a Thursday for no particular reason except that she owned it, and it was beautiful. Taffeta, with its characteristic rustle and sheen, appeared in day dresses and skirts as well as evening wear. The research brief confirms silk and taffeta as documented 1950s fabrics for dressy wear, And current fashion designers are using both in daytime collections in a way that would have felt entirely natural to a post-war homemaker who understood that fabric quality was its own kind of statement. Number 23 is the girdle, and I am going to ask you to set aside whatever reaction you just had for a moment. In the 1950s, the girdle was not punishment, it was foundation. It was the structural layer that smoothed the silhouette under a pencil skirt or a fitted dress, and virtually every adult woman wore one as a matter of daily routine, not special occasion. The research brief confirms structured undergarments, including girdles, as a documented 1950s foundation piece. What is interesting is that modern shapewear, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry, is essentially the girdle rebranded. The function is identical. Only the name changed. Number 24 is the cone bra, or bullet bra, as it was also called. And this one has had a very specific and documented modern moment. The pointed, structured bra silhouette of the 1950s was engineered to create a particular chest shape under the fitted bodices of the era's dresses and sweaters. It was standard foundation wear, not avant-garde fashion. The research brief confirms the cone bra as a documented 1950s foundation piece. It reappeared in high fashion in the 1990s and has been cycling back through fashion editorial and runway presentations since, most recently appearing in collections that are explicitly referencing the post-war silhouette. Number 25 is the corset, and this is the piece that ties the entire research brief together, because the corset was the foundation of the foundation. The 1950s corset was not the Victorian whalebone construction of 50 years earlier. It was a lighter, more flexible garment, often made with elastic panels, designed to cinch the waist toward that documented ideal of 26 inches that the era's fashion press promoted. The research brief confirms corsets as a standard 1950s foundation piece. The modern corset revival, which has been one of the most widely documented fashion trends of the last 3 years, draws directly on this post-war version, structured, waist-defining, worn both as outerwear and as foundation. Now I want to step back for a moment and talk about the hourglass ideal itself, because it is the thread running through almost every item on this list. The research brief documents the 1950s ideal as 36 inches at the bust, 26 at the waist, and 36 at the hip. Every garment we have discussed, the corset, the girdle, the full skirt, the pencil skirt, the fit and flare dress, was engineered to approximate or accentuate those proportions. This was not accidental. It was a coordinated system of dressing, where each layer reinforced the one above it. Understanding that system is what allows you to look at a 1950s outfit and understand why it worked as well as it did. Let me tell you about the kitten heel, which is number 26 on our expanded list, because it deserves its own moment. The kitten heel is a short, slender heel, typically between 1 and 2 inches, with a slight curve inward at the back. It was the heel a 1950s woman wore when she needed to be on her feet all day, but still wanted to look dressed. It was the heel for grocery shopping, for school pickups, for a long afternoon of errands. Modern fashion writers have documented the kitten heel's return as part of the 1950s revival, and it is appearing in collections from major designers who are explicitly citing the post-war era as their reference point. Number 27 is the ballet flat, which entered American women's casual wardrobes in the early 1950s and has never fully left. The ballet flat is a thin-soled, flat shoe with a rounded toe and a simple construction. And in the 1950s, it was the shoe worn with capri pants, with casual day dresses, with the kind of weekend outfit that said comfortable without saying careless. Audrey Hepburn wore them constantly in her off-duty photographs of the era. They are documented as part of the 1950s casual footwear revival, and the current versions being sold by every major shoe brand are almost indistinguishable from the originals in silhouette. Number 28 is the headscarf, and this is one of those pieces that carried more information than its size would suggest. A 1950s woman tied a silk or cotton scarf over her hair in the car with the windows down, in the garden, on a breezy day when she did not want to undo the pin curls she had set the night before. It was practical, and it was charming, and it was tied in a dozen different ways depending on the occasion. The headscarf is documented as part of the 1950s accessories revival in current fashion, and it is appearing on street-style accounts and in editorial shoots with a frequency that would have been completely familiar to any post-war homemaker. Number 29 is the day dress with a defined collar, and I want to be specific about what I mean because the collar in the 1950s was a design element in its own right. Peter Pan collars, pointed shirt collars, wide sailor collars. These were the details that gave a simple cotton dress its character. They were often in white or a contrasting color. They were often starched, and they framed the face in a way that drew the eye upward. The collared day dress is part of the broader A-line and day dress revival documented in current fashion, and the specific collar details of the 1950s are appearing in contemporary collections, with a precision that suggests designers are working directly from period references. Number 30 is the wiggle dress, which is the pencil skirt's more dramatic cousin and deserves its own entry. A wiggle dress is a sheath dress cut so close through the hips and thighs that it produces a characteristic walk, a small, precise step that is entirely its own. It was the dress worn by women who understood that clothing could be a kind of performance. It appeared in offices, at cocktail parties, at any occasion where a woman wanted to be noticed in a composed and deliberate way. The wiggle dress is documented as part of the 1950s revival in current fashion, and modern versions are being produced with the same close-cut and below-the-knee hem that defined the original. Number 31 is the puff sleeve, which Good Housekeeping specifically names as a romantic detail from the 1950s that is back in current fashion. The puff sleeve in the 1950s appeared on day blouses, on party dresses, on the kind of top a woman wore to a church social or a neighborhood gathering. It was gathered or pleated at the shoulder and tapered to a fitted cuff, creating a volume at the top of the arm that was simultaneously feminine and structural. The puff sleeve is one of those details that reads as instantly nostalgic to anyone who has looked at photographs of post-war American women, and its current revival is one of the most visually direct connections between the 1950s and today's fashion. Number 32 is the shirt dress, which is the day dress cut like a button-front shirt with a collar, button placket, and often a belted waist. In the 1950s, the shirt dress was the casual alternative to the more formal day dress, and it was beloved precisely because it was easy to put on, easy to move in, and looked pulled together without requiring a petticoat or structured undergarments. It was the dress a woman wore when she had a full day ahead of her and needed to look decent from 8 in the morning until 6 at night. The shirt dress is documented as part of the 1950s day dress revival in current fashion, and it is one of the most commercially successful pieces of the current revival. Number 33 is the trench coat, which has roots going back much further than the 1950s, but which took on its specific post-war American form in that decade. Double-breasted, belted, knee-length, in beige or camel, worn over a suit or a day dress for errands and appointments. The trench coat was the 1950s woman's all-weather outer layer, and it was chosen for its practicality as much as its appearance. It is documented as part of the broader 1950s inspired outerwear revival in current fashion, and the specific post-war version, belted, structured, knee-length, is the version that keeps appearing in contemporary collections as the definitive reference. Number 34 is the halter neck top or dress, which in the 1950s was the warm weather alternative to the full-skirted day dress. The halter tied or fastened behind the neck, leaving the shoulders and upper back bare, and it appeared on sundresses, on swimsuit cover-ups, and on casual summer dresses worn in the backyard or at a picnic. It was considered appropriate for warm weather and informal occasions, and it was often made in bright cotton prints. The halter neck is documented as part of the 1950s summer dress revival in current fashion, and current versions in polka dots and florals are almost indistinguishable from what you would find in a 1956 Sears summer catalog. Number 35 is the wide-brimmed sun hat, which in the 1950s served a purpose beyond fashion. Women who spent time in the garden, at the beach, or at outdoor social occasions wore wide-brimmed hats as practical sun protection, and they were made in straw, in cotton, in woven raffia, and in felt for cooler seasons. They were often worn with a scarf tied around the brim and knotted under the chin. The wide-brimmed hat is documented as part of the 1950s accessories revival in current fashion, and the specific straw and raffia versions are appearing in spring and summer collections with the same proportions and styling details that defined the post-war originals. Number 36 is the saddle shoe, which was primarily a young woman's and teenager's shoe in the 1950s, but which has been documented as part of the broader post-war footwear revival. The saddle shoe is a flat, lace-up Oxford with a contrasting leather panel across the midfoot, typically in white and black or white and brown. It was worn with bobby socks, with circle skirts, with the casual weekend outfits of post-war American teenagers. The saddle shoe is appearing in current footwear collections as a deliberate 1950s reference, and it is being worn in ways that are almost identical to how it was styled 70 years ago, with rolled cuff jeans, with full skirts, with the same cheerful informality. Number 37 is the T-length dress, which falls between the knee and the ankle, typically hitting at mid-calf. In the 1950s, the T-length dress was worn for afternoon social occasions, for garden parties, for the kind of gathering that was too formal for a day dress, but not quite formal enough for a floor-length gown. It was often in silk or taffeta, often in a floral or solid pastel, and it had a particular grace in movement because the longer skirt caught the air differently than a knee-length one. The T-length dress is documented as part of the 1950s formal and semi-formal revival in current fashion, and it is appearing in bridal and occasion wear collections with a frequency not seen in decades. Number 38 is the novelty print, which is the circle skirt's decorative vocabulary extended to other garments. Novelty prints in the 1950s featured repeating motifs that were often playful, specific, and entirely unexpected. Lobsters, cocktail glasses, bicycles, garden tools, musical instruments, maps, animals. They were printed on cotton day dresses, on aprons, on scarves, on blouses. The novelty print was a way of having a personality within the constraints of the era's relatively structured silhouette. It is documented as part of the 1950s pattern revival in current fashion, and current designers are producing novelty prints with the same sense of specific, cheerful whimsy that characterized the originals. Number 39 is the peplum jacket or blouse, which is the garment with a short flared ruffle or panel attached at the waist. In the 1950s, the peplum appeared on suit jackets, on blouses, and on the bodices of dresses, and its function was identical to the full skirts. It created the illusion of a wider hip relative to a narrow waist, emphasizing the hourglass silhouette that the era prized. The peplum is documented as part of the 1950s tailored suit revival in current fashion, and it has been appearing on blazers and tops in contemporary collections, with a regularity that would have been immediately recognizable to a post-war woman shopping at her local department store. Number 40 is the gingham check, which in the 1950s was the fabric of summer. Gingham, a simple woven check in 2 colors, appeared on everything from picnic tablecloths to day dresses to aprons to children's school clothes. On a woman's dress, gingham read as cheerful, practical, and unpretentious, which made it the fabric of choice for casual, warm-weather dressing. It is documented as part of the 1950s pattern revival in current fashion, and the specific post-war uses of gingham on full-skirted day dresses and fitted shirt dresses are the versions appearing in current collections. The attic remembers, even when we forget. Gingham has been here before, and it is here again. There is a whole world hiding in what nobody said out loud. When I look at this list of 25 pieces, and I look at what is on the racks in stores right now, and I look at what fashion writers are explicitly calling a 1950s revival, what I see is not nostalgia for a simpler time. I see something more specific than that. I see a recognition that the women of the post-war era understood something about dressing, that we have been slowly relearning, that clothing works as a system, that each piece is in conversation with the others, and that the result, when the system is working, is a coherence and a presence that is genuinely difficult to achieve any other way. What I want you to take away from this video is not a shopping list. It is a framework. The 1950s woman was not dressing to follow trends. She was dressing within a system that had a logic, a coherence, and a genuine understanding of proportion, fabric, and occasion. Every piece we have discussed, from the swing dress to the structured handbag to the cat-eye sunglasses to the pearl necklace, was part of that system. And the reason these pieces keep coming back is not that fashion is running out of ideas. It is that the system worked. Your grandmother knew something they stopped teaching, and it turns out the answer was hanging in her closet the whole time. If this video gave you something to think about, or reminded you of something you already knew but had not put into words, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. Tell me which piece surprised you the most, or which one is already in your own closet. If you are new to Clara's American Attic, this is what we do here. We dig into the unspoken rules and forgotten wisdom of mid-century American women, and we bring it back out into the light. There is a lot more where this came from. Subscribe if you want to be here when the next one goes up, and I will see you in the attic.